Hi everybody, and welcome back to Bonkers B Movies. This week we're going to be talking about the 1968 film Barbarella, arguably one of the most famous examples of a B movie or a science fiction film. It's a really bizarre and quite fun 60s campy movie. So let's get right into it. It's directed by Roger Van Dam, and it stars Jane Fonda. They were a married couple at the time. I think they divorced a couple of years after this. Jane Fonda, obviously the daughter of Henry Fonda, who just a decade prior had been in, 12 Angry Men, an Alfred Hitchcock film. So I think this was her big breakout role. I'm pretty sure. And basically the plot of this film, it's quite bizarre. So it's set in sort of a near undetermined future where Earth, and I guess most of the universe is pacified. They don't believe in wars. They don't have weapons. They don't understand violence. And Barbarella seems to be some sort of agent of Earth, which doesn't seem to have an army or a police force anymore. Basically, a scientist, Duran Duran, which is where the band got its name, the villain of this movie. Spoiler alert there, but the scientist goes missing and she's sent off to go and find him because he has a weapon, the positronic ray, which can put people into the fourth dimension. And she doesn't understand why would anyone want to have a weapon, but she's dispatched after him. Um, and through the story, she goes to this planet which is sort of is not as civilized as Earth or as she's accustomed to. She meets various characters, including Pygar the Angel, who is a blind angel who doesn't have the morale to fly anymore, played by John Philip Law, who is quite a favourite actor of mine. He's in Danger Diablo, but also he plays Sinbad in the Golden Voyage of Sinbad, which is for me the best of the Ray Harryhausen Sinbad trilogy. And if you haven't seen The Golden Voyage of Sinbad, I'd totally recommend it. It's quite a weird role for him here because he's like, it's just quite an odd. It's a blind angel who's been cast into a labyrinth, and he doesn't want to fly. Like, I mean, that's this film. It's just very bizarre. The choices. There's like weird shining twins at one point who she comes across, and they capture her and they lead her to like a creepy dolls party with a bunch of kids. For some reason, all the kids in this movie have like insanely weird hairdos. But getting back to the story, so basically, she winds up on this planet. She meets this angel in the labyrinth, and then she goes to the capital, Sogo, and it's like it's meant to be like a capital of evil, and all the good people are chucked in the labyrinth. Um, she winds up meeting the tyrant, who is a woman that keeps calling her pretty pretty, and is just very creepy. And there's the concierge, who is sort of the tyrant's second in command, but then it turns out the concierge is Duran Duran. So getting on to more of the sort of specifics of the film, the opening of this film basically sets it up as a campy 60s B movie. I mean, immediately there is it's just like our ship has like a campy space voice and sings her awake. There's a title song at the opening's like Barbarella Psychedela, and it's basically like an Austin Powers soundtrack. But weirdly, the score and the songs for this film is actually really cool. It's like a weird sort of 60s jazzy Engelbert Humperdinck. I don't know what's going on, but it really like comes through in the movie. You're constantly going, I really like the sound of that. But yeah, so there's the opening of the film is basically just a very long sequence where she's floating about in zero gravity, and then it's sort of zooming in as you see her take off one bit of clothing at a time, set to the music, and then she's like fully unclothed, but the titles are sort of trying to hide bits, but it's not really. Um, it's quite weird. I don't know if it's aged well. because of that. Because then the president of Earth phones her and she's like, "Let me go and put some clothes on," and he's like, "No, don't bother." So then you have just another maybe 5 minute sequence where she's just stood there, unclothed while the president's talking to her. Um, but that does set up, I guess, the tone of the film. I guess it did come out during the time of the sexual revolution, and it's very campy and it knows what it is, and you get that immediately in the opening. Um, so it does get sort of stranger and stranger, as you start to understand, like on Earth, people take pills to with their partner rather than doing anything physical. Which, by the way, Demolition Man just totally stole that. That's a plot point in Demolition Man. For some reason in the spaceship, all the walls are furry. As I say, there's like sort of weird characters running about. There's these soldiers called the Black Guard who, um, I think Pygar refers to them as not having fleshy material, so they just sort of blow up. Um, and you can't really, I can't tell if it's meant to be serious or it was always designed to be totally tongue in cheek. Um, I guess I'll get into this. Basically, the big final sequence of the film, is Duran Duran sort of captures her. This is the start of the final sequence. He captures her and puts her in what I could only describe as a pleasure piano. I think he calls it the excessive machine. Essentially, she's put in this machine and it keeps cutting back to him like bashing away at the keys, and then it will cut to her and like her clothes are flying out the machine, there's steam, and she's sweating and making all these faces and moaning. So, and he says it's going to kill her with pleasure, so that the machine will give her enough pleasure that she'll die, which is just it's just, how did they come up with that? And then the sequence ends with the machine literally being caught in fire because she like outmanaged to pleasure the pleasure machine. So that's the sort of movie you're dealing with here. It ends with like a battle with a pleasure piano. So I think it obviously knows what it is, but I'm just surprised how much it did. I guess it was in a time in the 60s they could probably get away with things more than they do today. Um, and because there's also Pygar the angel, doesn't have morale to fly. He doesn't want to. And the way they sort of get around that is she takes him back to his house, and then the next scene is he's flying in the air, because they've obviously spent some time together. So that's a weird. It's like, I guess again, if you think of this whole film in the context of the 60s and the sexual revolution, it makes a lot more sense, but it's still very bizarre. It's also just really creepy in that how she's treated, that anytime she does anything for anyone, they just want basically to spend some time with her in return. She's constantly being unclothed or her clothes are torn and she's having to costume change. You know, it shows her in a way that basically the minute she does anything with a man in the film, she's singing. Every time it cuts to her after she's singing, she's happy. It's quite one dimensional in that aspect, showing her. It's also creepy in the sense of, as I mentioned earlier, you get shining twins who just randomly pop up in this film. The tyrant queen who keeps calling her pretty pretty, and you originally see her pretending to be a poorer person with an eye patch and some sort of weird claw whip thing. Also, the Shining twins take her back to this weird doll party thing going on with all the kids, but the dolls are like the dolls from your nightmare, and they have like silver, gnawing teeth, and the sound effect of when they clamp down is genuinely horrible, and you see her getting little bites, taken out her legs. There's also, I guess, a really weird bit in that I think it's meant to be creepy, but she gets sort of put in a cage and a bunch of birds attack her, but it just looks like a bunch of birds flying about. They don't look scary, but they sort of overcomplicate it with her just sort of screaming and then the birds all sitting on her. and you're meant to be scared, I guess. Going back to the creepiness, particularly in the doll scene, is the sound design. While the kids are captured by sort of men who are tasked to capture kids and take them back to Sogo, but while that is happening, they just keep repeating this scream noise over and over again, and it's really disturbing. Like literally, it's one of those things that is quite weird and freaky, because it's not set to a specific person screaming. It just replays over and over again. There's a lot of odd sound choices in this movie, but it does sort of add to the just what is going on with this film. So I guess as well, I'll just jump back to the villain. Duran Duran is quite boring. They try to sort of wrap it up, and who is he? And it's the concierge the whole time. And at the end, he takes over the planet, but he doesn't understand things well enough to do it, so it all gets sort of blown up in his face. Um, he's just sort of one note and one dimensional. I guess that's the main problem with this film, I guess, is that there is no real sort of threat or danger or story. It's more just watching this character and all the sort of campy things that unfold. But that is it's a really fun watch. That's the thing. Obviously, this film's really weird as I'm discussing it. But it's the sort of film that you can really like have a fun time with. The fact this film exists, it was made. It's also quite surprising, I guess, because it's pre-Star Wars, that there wasn't more of these, because I wouldn't have been like you. I think you could easily have a couple of different films and it would be just as bizarre. It's just really out there. The sound design, the score, it's quite inventive. It's different. You won't even now. You wouldn't have seen much stuff like this, and it was made 50 years ago or so. It's just really out there. Jane Fonda's great in the role, as is John Philip Law, as Pygar the Angel. The stage design and all of that leaves a little to be desired, because it just does look a bit. The flying sequences in particular look quite bad, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that it was 1968. But genuinely, it won't be for everyone. It's got its issues and it's quite weird, but I would highly recommend this movie. If you like the sound of like a pleasure piano, an angel that's blind and needs a morale to fly, a woman coming from a future that there's no such thing as war, to the point she gets given guns out of I think it's the Conflict Museum. It's really specific and tonally very campy, but I think you'll have a good time with it. And it's been heavily rumoured for a while that Sydney Sweeney's looking to do a remake of it with Edgar Wright, which would be interesting if that ever happened. But so there you go. There's my Bonkers B Movie review of Barbarella from 1968. Let me know if you've seen it or if you're going to watch it, and I'll see you next week for another Bonkers B Movie. Cheers!